Mother Nature, not our fault.
Well, he called me, so he's still on, chairman of the traffic safety board.
Okay, we'll call the
Doug is for
first
DPW.
meeting of the,
DPW already assessed it.
if you'll allow us to continue, we'll call the first meeting of the Sales Tax Allocation Committee to order. After looking at what this involves, I'm gonna ask that maybe we change the name of the committee to Mission Impossible. I mentioned that to somebody else this morning. And I kinda like to thank Mike and Rob Lynch from the Treasurer's Office. Martin has been a tremendous help in this, and as you'll see when we start the meeting here. And a gentleman by the name of Bruce Castor, who is an attorney for New York State Taxation. There was a lot of time spent, and the reason that it's taken so long to get to this first meeting is because we quickly found out that there were a lot of questions that we couldn't answer ourselves, so we wanted to understand what was happening. The other thing I'd mention, I'd kinda like to keep us focused on this meeting on sales tax allocation only, and not to look at this and make a decision as to whether or not we're gonna do anything with sales tax allocation and then go on. So with that, I'd like to introduce Martin. He'll do a better job in presenting what we found than I will, so, go ahead, Martin.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. We do have, a presentation on the screen that, our chairman of this, subcommittee was very, instrumental in preparing. I was very impressed, with the product, especially the little characters, you know, the dollar sign and the guy at the cash register, and it really adds a lot of color to it. So I thought this was great. I can tell you, this is a pretty dry subject, so having something like this made it at least a little more livable. But just by way of background, in Warren County, our current tax rate is 7%. If you could go to the next page, thank you. Our current sales tax rate is 7%. New York State gets 4%. Outside of the city of Glens Falls, Warren County receives 3%. And after expenses, as we know, Warren County splits with the towns pursuant to that assessed valuation formula that is in 1262D of the tax law, and also our long-established local laws and resolutions for how we distribute sales tax. It's that formula, the assessed value of the town as affairs to the whole, and that's how we split with the towns what's left over for our expenses. Now, inside the city of Glens Falls, the city keeps 1.5% of that 3%, and Warren County gets 1.5% of that 3% as well. In 2002, there was an agreement that was entered into between the city, between Queensbury and the city and the town, the county rather, with respect to a 2% of Warren County net sales tax that would get paid to the city for purposes of certain infrastructure and capacity with respect to the sewage treatment, as I understand it. That's a 30-year agreement. That is not 2% of the 7%. That is 2% of the unallocated sales tax. In other words, the dollars that are otherwise available to be shared among the towns, that 2% comes out of that, as I understand it. So we take that 2% as an expense. Essentially, it's an unallocated amount. It's an expense. And then what's left over after our expenses otherwise are paid gets shared among the towns pursuant to that 1262D assessed valuation formula. Everybody with me so far?
I'm afraid I am.
You are?
Yeah. So you're telling me that we, the town, pay that 2% to the city of Glens Falls?
Well, I think it's the county. You know, these are county sales tax dollars that come into the county.
But it comes out of our pot.
Essentially, it comes out of the total pot. That's correct.
Interesting.
When I look at the figures for the sales tax, the county portion and the town, city, village portion equal. So wouldn't it wouldn't equal if it was 2% was just coming out of the town side. Seems like it comes out of the, instead of 25 million, would come out of 50 million. Or, how do they two equal, is another way to say it.
Well, I'm assuming you're addressing me.
Yeah.
I gotta, this is a hard one to explain. The agreement was actually made between the county and the city. And it comes out of the county share. So, let's say we split and it's 25-25 each for the county and 25. That 2% comes out of the 25 million that would be the county share
After expenses.
after expenses.
So it's really coming out of the town spot.
No.
Well,
No, not
it-
really.
it-
I mean, well,
what else- what
I mean,
else
it's,
is on that side?
if you look at it as the whole, the 2% of what we're getting, all right, goes to the city based on this agreement, all right? So, I mean, whether you wanna say it's coming out of the county share or the town share, I mean, it's basically coming out of the share that we get.
The way that I look at it is there's because of that 2%, there's less
For everybody.
for everybody. That's how I look at it.
But if you look at what Rob Lynch sends, there's 25 million for the county, and then there's 25 million that's split up, and it shows towns, village,
The county
and then
gets,
city, and they both equal. There's no
the county ends up with 48% instead of 50.
Right, so it's coming really
But
out of
I
that.
think it's important that, in my view, Mr. Chairman, I mean, the agreement is the agreement. It's a 30-year agreement. If we wanna talk about it, we can talk about it. But I think the purpose of this meeting is to just describe the history of sales tax distribution and to talk about the law and to talk about some options. The agreement is from 2002. I think it expires in 2031, as I understand it, and it is what it is. And where the money comes from, how the money is allocated, et cetera, is pursuant to a complicated formula within that agreement. But I don't view this meeting, unless I'm wrong, I don't view this meeting as the purpose of is to debate that agreement or to dissect that agreement. I think the purpose of this meeting and the charge that the subcommittee has is to figure out if there are any other options available to the county to distribute sales tax around the county.
You're absolutely right, Martin. John?
I think it's important that we understand the big picture.
Absolutely.
Right.
And you're right, not get bogged down in the details, but I need to understand the big picture. So, what I'm getting is, we have a total amount that's collected for the year in terms of sales tax revenue. From that total amount, we deduct the expenses, the county's expenses. And then we deduct the county share, and then the amount that remains, the city gets 2%. And then the towns distribute the rest of it according to an apportionment formula. Is that accurate?
Well, basically what it is a 50-50 split. That's the way it was set up. 50% of what's left goes to the towns and 50% is maintained at the county.
Yeah, but
48% we end up with at the county, because 2% of our 50% goes to the city.
But if you look at the sales tax distribution that I just got, the total brought in 2014 was 49.4 million. The part that was distributed to, it says distributions of sales tax is what it's classified as, comes to a total of 23.5 million. So it's not half. There's
Well,
something that
because-
happened in between.
Well, the 1.5% split in the city of Glens Falls affects this, plus there's, I don't know, what do you wanna call it, carrying costs, expenses, or whatever. But the basic, boiling it down to the simplest formula, what's left over 50% goes distributed to the towns, and 50% stays at the county. Of our 50%, 2% of that goes to the city based on that agreement.
I think,
So in other
Mike,
words, we end up with 48% and the towns end up with 50 of what's left over.
I think what they're trying to wrestle with here is that the share that the towns get is not reduced by the amount that the county gives the city. Is that true?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Exactly right. So
That-
it isn't.
That was my question.
That's what I was trying to answer with your
Yeah.
point.
Well, Bud finally got around to it.
Okay,
All right,
all right,
so
can
the-
we go on now?
But the city gets 2% of the gross amount?
The
Of
net.
the county portion.
County-
The unallocated amounts from the county, correct.
You get the whole thing split in half. The
All right,
county gets,
so you got gross revenue, you got gross sales tax revenue minus expenses.
let's say it's 50
Then the
million.
county gets apportionment of half of that. And then
2%.
out of the county's apportionment, the city gets 2%.
That's 2%.
All right. I'm getting it.
All right. Wake up, Martin.
I'm just, it's okay.
Support.
And I think what the next page, is the options. The best that I could come up with, and with the assistance of our chairman and Mike, Swan, what are our options, at the present time? Well, first option is, obviously, is to continue with the present arrangement, which we've been discussing. But one option, would be, which is at the top there, is to consider giving up more of the share, that the county retains, after the split with the towns, which we've just been discussing. Essentially what that would mean is that, one way of looking at that, I think, is essentially what that would mean would be a de facto tax increase, at the county level, because the county has certain expenses that it needs revenue, to meet those expenses, and by giving up more of the county's share of, sales tax dollars, the county would have less available to meet its obligations and its expenses, so further additional revenue would need to be raised. My position here is not to talk about the merits of either of, these three options. My position is to just simply let you know that these are the options that I think you have available to you, for your consideration. The second option is an interesting option, and one that would require some discussion with the city of Glens Falls. As we know, the city, charges and collects sales tax under section 1210 of the tax law. That's the same authority that the county charges and collects sales tax. But there is a possibility under what's known as 1262C of the tax law, which incidentally is the same statute that the 2002 agreement was based on, that we've been discussing. But under 1262C, if the city were to opt out of charging and collecting tax, under 1210, that would put the city and the county in a position where perhaps we could enter into an arrangement with the city, where all of the 7% of the sales tax would come to the county, but by agreement, a certain amount of that sales tax, presumably, the 1.5% that the city is retaining under 1210, but that amount they would be made whole on. So in other words, they wouldn't be shorted, any sales tax revenue. But if they agreed that we would collect the 7%, and that by agreement we would turn over to them an amount, the functional equivalent amount of what they get on their own now, plus perhaps an incentive of some measure, for purposes of the agreement, that would give the county more flexibility, under the state tax law to distribute taxes in a broader way among the towns. Now, of course, that requires the agreement of the city of Glens Falls. Whether or not that can be achieved is not up to me, but I simply point that out as an option. That's what I call the flexible option, which would give the county, if we go through that process, would give the county much more flexibility to distribute sales taxes.
So you're not raising any more money, you're changing the method of collection so that you have more options with the same amount.
Couldn't say it better myself. Correct, exactly right. Exactly right. The third and final option, is that the county could seek special legislation particular to Warren County that gives the county the ability to distribute the dollars to the towns, I should say, outside of the city, pursuant to a different formula or different arrangement other than the assessed valuation as to town versus assessed valuation as to whole, which is the 1262 arrangement. We could seek some special legislation. I haven't formulated in my own mind what that legislation could look like. I do know that there is the opportunity to do that if the county wanted to come up with some special legislation. Before getting too far in any such special legislation or new formula, if you will, we would send that down to the state tax department for their review. And of course, that would require, I believe it would require a 2/3 vote here of the county supervisors to pass or to further that legislation through the state process. Obviously, it would require the cooperation of our state legislative representatives, and then you're subject to the processes at the state legislature for passage of any special legislation. But that is an option. Some counties have done that in different ways. I'm not here to suggest that we should do that or shouldn't do that. It's just an option that is identified.
Dennis?
Sick of listening to me yet?
Huh?
I said, are you tired of listening to me yet?
No.
So you're telling us, that one of the problems we have with manipulating the sales tax is that we have a partner, the city of Glens Falls. So these last two options are to relieve us of our partnership obligations, hopefully still making them whole, and then we have free will to have our way with what's left.
Well, option 2 would give you more flexibility with respect to those sales tax dollars.
Correct.
Option 3 would keep the status quo. In other words, the city would still charge and collect sales tax
But they would
under 1210.
agree to whatever.
They wouldn't have to agree. They're on their own. They're 1210. They're going to charge and collect their sales tax. We're still going to get 1.5% of the sales tax that's charged and collected within the city. What the special legislation would do, Supervisor, is it would take us out of that restricted zone in 1262D of the tax law and give us perhaps more flexibility to distribute sales tax dollars outside of the city. Right now, our formula is the assessed valuation formula, and that has been raised as a particular concern by some that it is unfair. And so in thinking that through, it would seem that one way to possibly address that would be to change that formula by special legislation applicable to Warren County. But I want to make sure that would not change in my view, that would not change what the city does.
Evelyn, you had a question?
I just needed a little clarification, and looking at the differences between 2 and 3. 3, we would need special legislation to change how we distribute it, but if I'm understanding your explanation of 2 correctly, you're saying if we were to reformulate an agreement of some kind with Glens Falls, that could possibly give us more discretion. Would we need additional legislation in order to do that? I mean, I'm not...
That's a really good question. The answer to that is no. As I understand 1262C, what you can do at that point, if you are in control of that 7%, the total 7% inside the city, outside the city, if you are in control of that 7%, you can enter into an agreement under 1262C with the city of Glens Falls, for whatever the term may be, to distribute whatever agreed upon dollar amounts to the city that you have reached. Within 1262C, that would give you, the supervisors, the ability to be more flexible as to distribution of what's left over to the towns. You wouldn't be subject to that 1262D assessed valuation formula, because the city charges and collects under 1210 at this point in time. You are restricted to that 1262D formula with respect to distributing sales tax dollars to the towns pursuant to that assessed valuation formula.
That clears it up, thank you,
Okay.
Mark.
Well, Martin, you said we're in control of the 7%. Did you mean we're in control of the 3%? Because the 4%...
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, you're in control of the 3%, that's correct.
Doug?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So if we're not getting any additional revenue, what incentive would Glens Falls have for pursuing any other options other than the current format? So, did you hear what I said?
Yeah, absolutely, Supervisor. I mean, and that's a question that would, it seems to me that's more of a political question than a legal question. So that's where I'm coming from on it.
Okay, yeah, 'cause I'm sitting here thinking, well, why would Glens Falls want to change the format when there's no additional revenue to be had by them or any of, other than the rest of the towns in the county may get additional revenue if a format change.
There could be, built into that agreement with the city, an incentive over a period of time for additional funding. 1262C would allow for that. So in other words, if the city were to take whatever number they generate now from their 1.5%, and assuming the county said, that's the number that you will get over the course of the next X number of years, and in order to incentivize you to enter into this agreement, we could build in a certain percentage increase on an annual basis or 5-year basis or whatever the case may be. So there may be an opportunity to build in incentives in the agreement that the city of Glens Falls might find attractive.
But then wouldn't though the county then, because we're getting 1.5 of that 3%, wouldn't we then be getting less for the rest of the county? Am I correct on that?
Not necessarily based upon projections, based upon certain assumptions that you would make. I don't necessarily think that you would absolutely be getting less, but remember, even you might not be getting any more, you might not be getting any less. But the fact of the matter is that it would in part solve a problem that has been identified here in that the way sales tax is distributed among the towns outside of the city.
I think you have to remember too, that in 2030, well, I'll get to you later, in 2032, the city is gonna lose a significant amount of money when this contract expires.
I don't think you and I have to worry
And
about that.
I could see how they might be able to do better by entering into a separate agreement, but, I don't know. Go ahead, John.
Well, I think to Supervisor Beatty's point, I think what he's suggesting, and I think he's correct, is that probably, perhaps, the only mechanism that the city would go along with in changing the formula that's currently there is if they were going to make a monetary gain in all this picture. I think that's what Doug is saying. And if that's the case, they're gonna get a bigger piece of the sales tax pie, somehow, some way, some formula, then there'd be less for everyone else.
I think the way that I would envision it is not necessarily a guarantee that they're going to get more, but coming up with a formula whereby there's the potential that they get more, depending upon what happens in any particular year.
Gene?
You know, because I researched this a lot, and, you know, agreement, I don't disagree with the agreement, but I think the only mistake that was made was sticking with a percentage number. Because what happened, when it started, it was 330,000 or so that they were getting from sales tax revenue. But in the last 10 years, our sales tax has increased a significant amount, and they're still getting 2% of it. Now it's up over $500,000, I think this year just cracked over $500,000 for 2014. So if it would've been we could work with the Glens Falls, I mean, if they needed 330,000 at that time to do this deal, well, they're making an extra 150,000, 170,000 already after 10 years, and I think with the sales tax revenue still increasing, they could get a bigger portion of money as the years go by. And that's what I feel we should go back to the contract and look at that, or see what Glens Falls might wanna do.
Yeah.
But that's not the whole point of this issue, is that issue. I mean, to me, and to get back to what happens, if you stop doing that issue and that gets contracted with Queensbury, they're gonna be paying $500,000, and that $500,000 stays in the county, what you were asking, it gets distributed, maybe more roads, more, it will lower the taxes for all the county people. So we're paying $500,000 in sales tax revenue to help one particular town in our county, and that's what I think I disagree with. But that's altogether different subject. The subject really arose was, how can we get to a little fairer distribution to the smaller towns that have less sales tax available? Our towns are not gonna grow, Lake Luzerne is never gonna get a Lowe's or a Home Depot, or all these big companies that are collecting this. But all the people in Lake Luzerne, as much as my friend here doesn't understand the way I say it, we still go to Queensbury and spend our money, and our sales tax is going to Queensbury, that's where it is, because that's where we have to all go. So the smaller towns have no option to get more sales tax revenue by hoping we'll get a Home Depot in our town to get our property assessed values up. So that was my whole thing, just to come up with a different formula or some other way, even again, if we took 1% of that, county share, right now 2% is $500,000, 1% is $250,000. You could take something like that and maybe divide by some of the smaller towns. Another little side deal, let's call it, or a way to do something. But it just takes away from the whole. No matter what you do, the pie, eventually in the next 5 years, I believe, and I hope I'm not wrong, but I believe the more of the pie goes to the larger towns, the smaller, what's left of that pie go to the smaller towns. And I think it's gonna eventually down the road hurt a little bit.
Okay. Jim, then Bill, and then Dennis.
Yeah, I have a legal question. As I understand it, the present way of distributing the sales tax is by the tax base. But there are other ways of doing it with, I don't know if I understand them, but where you do tax base and population or population. If the present way, by the city staying with 1210D, is all of that set in concrete, or is this, or could the towns, or could the county change the distribution formula without the city changing it, without the city getting out of 1210D? Or would we have to agree, would we have to go into 1210C in order for the other formulas to work?
As long as the city continues to opt in charging and collecting sales tax under 1210, they're gonna do that.
Right.
We don't have any control over that, and as long as they do that, what we may do or not do is not dependent upon them. So
another formula could work.
Yeah, there is.
With respect to the town.
Yeah, the formulas in 1262D are really limited though, and you really are, in my view, limited to that assessed valuation ratio formula in 1262D. There is some discussion in that statute about populations, the latest census, et cetera. Looking at that and looking at how that would apply to Warren County, I didn't really see that as a viable option. To me, the more viable way of approaching this was the options that I identified.
And Bill?
Option one is, net effective of property tax increase, so we can cross that one out. Number two, requires the city of Glens Falls to go along with, so we don't know about that one. And number three, there's one pot of money, and the towns that are currently getting the lion's share would have to accept less in order for the smaller towns to get more. That's not gonna happen either.
Potentially, yes.
Dennis?
I couldn't agree with you more, Bill. given this quite a bit of thought. For a guy my age, it's tough to keep concentrating that long, but none of these are gonna work. You got the city of Glens Falls involved, you got 20 supervisors involved. Even though my assessed value in the town of Lake George has gone down 20% in the last 4 or 5 years, I still feel that's the fairest way to distribute this money. My proposal would be that we take money that we don't get from taxpayers, that's unallocated, and fell in our lap last year in the fall, and we dumped it in our general fund. We got $400,000 from the Indian nations for not having casino gambling. And we put it in our general fund. My proposal, it's not taxpayer money, that was found money. My proposal would be to take 50% of that, put it in the environmental fund that we already have in our budget. So last year you would have had 200,000. Take the other half, 200,000, and figure out some grand plan. We can do anything we want as long as the 20 of us can agree. Take the other 200,000 and figure out how we're gonna divvy that up among the towns. And that should be the topic of our discussion. We're never gonna do any of these things. This is way too complicated. And it's got too many players. Some of this would require some legislation and involvement. It's found money. We got 400,000 last year. We should get close to 500,000 this year.
Hey, Dennis, I hear what you're saying, and it's a good idea, but I kinda would like to stick with the sales tax allocation, whether or not we think we're gonna do anything with this, if we
Well,
wanna
I guess my point is, I'm not.
Well, it's
I'm
okay.
totally against it. It's way
If everybody
too
else
complicated.
agrees, then we can move on, I guess, but.
I think that Dennis is right, but the problem with that is that's been budgeted.
Right.
That money's been budgeted, so.
Well, I objected to it when they did it last year, Bill.
Yeah.
I really did. That was found money, and we just dumped it in the budget.
Maybe in 2017, or 16, we could do it.
Well, we didn't do it last year, and obviously we're not gonna do it this year, but it's certainly something to consider.
Okay. Mike,
Well, I think what I was gonna bring up was kinda answered, but the second and the third option basically, would allow redistribution of the monies that goes to the towns. Basically, that's what the end result of those two options would be. And that's something that the board is gonna have to decide whether you wanna go that route and reallocate how everything is divided up among the towns. Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, Martin, the way as long as that agreement with the city is there, that they keep 1.5 and we get 1.5, that restricts how the county can distribute to the towns.
Yep, that's what underpins the whole process here, is that the city essentially opts in to 1210 and has the same authority to charge and collect sales tax as the county does. And as long as the city continues to do that, the law provides that the county is then restricted in what it can do by 1262D.
Frank, did you have a question? Oh, okay. Thought I saw your hand. Any other comments?
Wishful thinking.
Chad?
Well, in reapportionment, I could make the argument that Queensbury should get more. We've got 42% of the population, so if you wanted to reapportion that based on the population, Queensbury would favor that. And Queensbury could make the argument, and I have, that, we spend millions and millions and millions of town of Queensbury taxpayer money to do the roads and the maintenance and the infrastructure that produces the sales tax revenues in the first place. And the town of Queensbury probably produces a lion's share of those sales tax revenues. And if you're talking about reapportionment, I think at the same time, you'd have to talk about reapportionment of the burden of the property taxes. Queensbury pays, again, the lion's share of the property taxes that goes into the county's revenue. Queensbury has, last time I checked, $250 million worth of non-taxable properties that we bear the burden of providing infrastructure and EMS and fire services too, such as the county buildings, such as the college, and I could go on to $250 million worth that we have to bear the burden, and that's okay, I'm not complaining. But if any formula were to be devised that meant less money to the town of Queensbury, I think it would hurt the county in the long run. If you give us fewer resources than we already have, and we are fighting and scrapping for every single penny just like everybody else is, and we started to not expand our infrastructure, such as we're proposing to do, and remember, expanding our infrastructure will expand the sales tax revenue that we all benefit from. So I don't think you want to shoot the goose. That's my opinion.
So you're in favor of my proposal?
No,
Frank?
I'm not in favor of any redistribution that would mean less money to the town of Queensbury.
Well, that was part of my proposal.
It would surprise me if you were, John. Frank?
I agree with everything you're saying, John. And, if the town of Stony Creek was on the same, land restrictions as the town of Queensbury, wouldn't bother me. But when the state of New York limits what the town of Stony Creek and Oregon and part of Luzerne, part of Warrensburg, determine what we can do, we're not comparing apples to oranges.
Ron?
I'll try to keep it short, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There isn't a municipality I'm aware of, and not only in this county, but I think in this state, if not the country, that doesn't allocate expense of government based on an assessed value basis. Every one of you represents municipalities. That's how you do it. You take your expense of government, less your revenue, and you come up with your levy. And now if you take that revenue and you divert it in a fashion, what happens to your levy? What was that? It goes
up.
It goes up.
That's
Now, in this county, now the state of New York and the federal government, they do it based on an income approach, right? We all file income tax returns to pay for the cost of government. So in this county, that's how it was determined. Now, the only difference in that is that this county allows its municipalities to take its share. Let me say it again. It allows municipalities to take its share of the county sales tax revenue into their municipality should they desire to. And when they do that, what happens to their property tax levy in the county? It goes up proportionately. Of course it does. Now, if you divert significant amounts of general revenue in some fashion, what you do is you say to, for example, and I'm recommending this, but you say to the town of Queensbury, 34% bill we send you is insufficient. We want you to pay 34.5, 35, 36, 37. And Horicon, the percentage you pay, I could look here, but is too much. It should go down. But if you look at the share of Horicon's percentage of the county assessed value, which is their percentage of sales tax, at least the last 6 years, it's gone up substantially. Of course it has. As has Chester. As has a number of small communities. Now it's been stated, I think pointed at Lake George, that because of Lake George, you get a disproportionate share of the sales tax revenue. But the fact of the matter is, your share, at least the last 6 years, 7 years, has gone where?
Down.
Has gone down. In other words, Lake George's share of the sales tax has gone their percentage has gone down, as has, oh, by the way, Bolton. And some of the rural communities we've been talking about, for example, Warrensburg has gone up, maybe not significantly. A Thurman has stayed about the same, and you can look at all the numbers. And so what happens each year, depending on your tax base, depending on your equalization rate, depending on when you've done a reval. Now, Queensberry, for example, over that 6-year period, their percentage of the county expense, and I don't think you can talk revenue without talking expense, their share of the county expense has gone up almost a full percentage point. Now, it may seem like a minor amount, but in the last 6 years, that's over $1.3 million more. The Queensberry taxpayers are contributing to support the county levy. If you take sales tax away, that 1.3 becomes 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7. So when your percentage of the county levy goes up, or let me reverse it, if your percentage of the county sales tax goes up, your share of the county levy goes up. And it can result in significant dollars. For example, Horicans measured, a small town of Horicon was measured into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Chester, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that ends my statement. I mean, I think that this is how we choose to support county government, with the only difference is towns can bring some of the sales tax into their municipalities should they choose to. Now, some towns still leave some with the county. When this was done, a number of towns left their sales tax revenue with the county. And over time, they pulled that revenue into the towns, which they could do. But that was revenue that was their share of that revenue, no more, no less, that would otherwise have been applied against their county tax. Now, in terms of the city of Glens Falls, at least I think the term used to be called preemption. The city has the right to preempt. And that's any city, I believe, in this state. When a county goes to adopt sales tax, cities have a special condition, special right to take half the sales tax generated within the city. They have that as a right. It's not a negotiated thing. Now, they could negotiate it away, perhaps, but I'm not sure what we would put out there to want them to do that. And if they did, there'd be contracts that they'd enter into that would be equal to or better than the preemption privilege. And I see the chairman shaking his head yes, because he knows that for a fact. So he may have been involved in the original. So that's my short statement. I think that Mr. Dickinson's suggestions will bear more fruit going forward. And I think that as flawed as it is, and the other thing is this, not only in terms of the lake communities trying to dispel the idea of the lake communities getting an ever-increasing amount, or I should say Hague is about the same. I should put that out there. Hague hasn't changed much either. To try to put that to rest, because that's been printed and stated, and now as the sales tax pot has grown, naturally, all our sales tax revenues have increased, right? Some are suggesting our sales tax went down. Well, I'm saying it didn't go up as much as it would have had our share of the tax base had remained the same. So I just would put that out there. And I will say it one more time to the supervisors. Each year you receive a sheet that looks like this from the county treasurer. And this, on one page, on 1 8.5 by 11, is perhaps the most important financial information on the county that you will receive. Because in it, it shows the value of all the municipalities and shows what, for example, a Queensberry pays as a percent of that total. And if you collect these over time, it will tell you over time what your municipality and what other municipalities pay as a share of the county levy. And it changes. And it changes. And not only changes in dollar amount. The dollar amount is determined by the percentage your value is against the assessed value. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Any other comments? Jim?
Yeah, I did an analysis of the last 5 years of the percentage of percentage of each municipality's, the amount that they made up of the total 100%. And the top one over the last 5 years with loss was Bolton, which I think was 3.8%, and then Lake George, and then I believe the fourth one was Lake Luzerne, and then the rest were pretty close to zero. So the ones that have lost over the last 5 years are the ones with the lakefront property, which is Bolton and Lake George. Queensbury did all right, did a little bit better, even though it dipped, but it seems to be more resilient because you have other things. And it just is going the opposite of what you would think. You would think both Lake George and Bolton were increasing, but they're actually decreasing in value. It's only this year that I began to see it go up a little bit.
Just one short statement. Sales tax revenue went up about 1.2%.
Yes.
Inflation was 1.5%. So if you account for inflation, business activity in the county in terms of generation of sales tax revenue actually went down. I mean, I would like to be spending this kind of energy and this kind of effort to some analysis and thought as to what we can be doing as a county to effect the improvement of sales tax revenue as a whole so that we all benefit. We should spend some time and energy.
Well, economic development, John.
Yeah, and that's where I'd rather be putting my time and energy.
Dennis?
The problem with the decrease in the assessed value of the town of Lake George is a serious problem to us. And it is the driving force behind our comprehensive plan. We are, as I've stated many times, the smallest town in the state of New York. We are in the foothills of the Adirondacks. It's some rugged territory. We are pretty close to being built out. Zoning ordinances that set the tone of your neighborhood and establish the ability of your community to grow are based on vacant land. We in Lake George have very little vacant land. Our comprehensive plan is focusing more on redevelopment than we are on new development. And our driving force here is to keep Lake George in the economic position that it belongs in. Right now, we're losing ground. 2% in 5 years is a lot. It's a lot of money. And we have to make that money up someplace else. So we are hoping that this comprehensive plan and a new zoning plan will improve not only our businesses like motel and cabin businesses, most of those are gone, but we have a good number that are still there. We're talking 1950s and 60s and 70s these things were put up. And some of them are on prime property. In our zoning ordinance that we have now, they have almost zero chance of doing it. You can only paint them so many times before people stop staying in them. So we're hoping to allow redevelopment and get some of these prime properties back on the tax rolls. In some cases, in some instances, we can take a property assessed to X, redevelop it with the same number of units and have it assessed at 4X. So that's our driving force behind our comprehensive plan and redoing our zoning, and that all stems from trying to keep our assessed value. Based on that, based on the comments from John and some of the other supervisors, Bill, this is a complicated thing to try to squeeze money out of it. And I don't see, we're not generating any money here. We are not generating any additional dollars. We're just massaging the dollars that we have, and some of it's pretty complex. So I'm going to go back to my original statement. I think we should look at the casino money we're getting and develop a long-term plan with that casino money to do something constructive. More constructive than putting it in the general budget.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Before we, move on here, this committee, I would hope, has done its job, but I think in order for it to be completed, we have to disqualify all of those options. I guess I'm reaching out to you guys and saying, I think we all agree that the first option wouldn't be any good. The second option probably would work if we could get the city to agree with it. And the third option is asking for special legislation. Do you guys feel that we should lean toward any one of those? Yep.
I would like to comment briefly on the City of Glens Falls one. Bill alluded to it and, Ron, alluded to this as well. In order to get the City of Glens Falls to cooperate, any plan we have now, we are going to do the stick and carrot thing. And down the road, they're gonna get the carrot. So what you're doing is you are borrowing that money against the future debt with the City of Glens Falls. I don't see that as, it's certainly not something that I would do in this frame in the town of Lake George.
Okay. John?
I don't see any viability to any of the three options presented today.
Okay. Is there an agreement by the rest of the committee?
Agree.
Evelyn?
Yeah, I have to say I'm a little, well, it was interesting and educational anyway to learn that the City of Glens Falls controls Warren County and how Warren County distributes its funds. That was an educational moment. But, yeah, I can't see how any of those options are gonna be particularly attractive.
Okay. You agree, Jane?
Yeah, it's, I won't call it a losing battle, but I think we can still talk about something like Mr. Dickinson brought up, or clarify some of the other things. It's just a point, yeah, I can't say, well, he's gotta give up $100,000 and make Thurman happy and Lake Luzerne happy with $50,000 each, which it's not the true way, but my point was just to come up and see if we, could get some kind of, just a little support for some of the smaller towns, because I know how hard it is to struggle. And again, the only thing that I go back to, and everything I just said here, I agree, probably 95%, maybe more. But the point that I go back is to what the town's people pay to live in their towns. And when you get the taxes that go to, say, Queensbury at 56 cents per 100,000, or Bolton 51, or Hague, they don't even have a town tax, that shows something that they're getting a lot of sales tax revenue to keep. Where in our smaller towns, we're up in the $3.80 bracket. And that's what I'm fighting for. It's just how do we get that down a little bit? So, to live in Lake Luzerne on $1 million house costs twice as much as it does in other towns. People don't wanna understand that, but that it's true. And I understand, yeah, they have to take care of the roads and everything there, but that's my point, is what the town portion, not county, I'm not involved in the county thinking, but the monies that help town taxes get reduced comes from the sales tax revenue. And again, if they don't get their sales tax revenue where they can put it in their budget, yes, Queensbury people are gonna pay more in town taxes because you need more money to run your town. We're already up there. I mean, you take Kevin's not here, but Warrensburg, second largest town we have, second largest population, other than Queensbury. And I get more sales tax in Lake Luzerne than Warrensburg does, because their properties are not valued as well as Queensbury or all the people along the river. Not that it was 20 years ago they drew other straws, we drew other small straws, they drew other big straw, but that's life. But it's the town portion of taxes that I talk about. I'm happy to pay the county taxes, and I think anybody in Lake Luzerne would. But it's the town portion that we all struggle with as small towns, and we were just talking about it this morning. We just got $16,000 from the county to help us snow and ice, and we went through it this month already. So those are the things, we don't have a little fund that we can, so we struggle. That's my whole thing of bringing all this up. We struggle with the town expenses. You know, and, yeah, if I made $500,000 as supervisor, then I can't be sitting there complaining. But we don't make, you know, we keep everything down low. Do the best we can, but we have the same debt as paying our employees, buying salt, plowing roads, paving roads, as the bigger towns. But we don't have the funds. I mean, I can't put into my roads in town like Luzerne, I only use chips and throw in another 50,000. Where some of the towns put in $500,000 doing their roads. Yes, I know they got more roads than we have, but they keep them up better. So those are the things, I'm just talking about the town portion of what the taxpayers in Lake Luzerne have to pay to live in Lake Luzerne. And we try hard to keep them down, but it's tough.
Bill?
Yeah, I appreciate the lively discussion today, because out of lively discussion grows new ideas, but we're going over plowed ground, because in 1998, believe it or not, I was part of a revenue enhancement subcommittee consisting of Dick Caimano, Jerry Quintel, and myself. And Jerry Quintel took the sales tax issue, and I took the bed tax issue, and Nick took the credit.
I bet that's gonna make the paper.
So we went over all these ideas then, you know, and it's refreshing to hear it all again, but, and out of that grows new ideas, so.
Dennis?
But unless there's options 4, 5, and 6, I think we're out of options.
I'm just gonna throw one more thing out here.
I don't have to say that to you,
We
because
are
we
one of
lost the battle
3
today.
counties in the state of New York that are still at 7%. There's a lot of pushback from the legislation about giving us the 1%. Their concern is that we use it, if we get it, to directly, benefit taxpayers. I think with the casino money out there and pushing the 1% increase in our sales tax, that we could work out a long-term program whereby we could recover from that $400,000 monies that we put into our general fund last year. And I think that we would be farther ahead to push for the increased sales tax. In order to do that, we need to come up with a program that will direct that 1%, whatever it is going to directly affect taxpayers, reduce their tax burden. And I would think that would be a more viable way to go in any of these sales tax things.
Okay. Anybody else? Frank?
Well, I think another option is something that John mentioned at a budget meeting last fall. And how do we increase, sales in Queensbury? I mean, that's the place where sales are going on. You know, what's the best way that the county can assist Queensbury in increasing the retail sales? Everybody goes there to shop. I mean, people come from Vermont to go there to shop. You know, so that's what it is. Why don't we put all our effort to bringing in more box stores? I know people in Queensbury might not be, you know, fully supportive of that, but that's what it is.
You're absolutely right, and I can tell you that I know EDC is getting involved now because they got some information from Paul in trying to resolve the traffic issue out here, because we think there's a lot of people that see the traffic and just go around it and they don't bother stopping. But that's the approach we should go, try to improve our efficiencies, yeah.
Yeah, I looked at Glens Falls as tax base a long time ago, and I noticed that I think 60% of it is the housing. And I thought at the time that, sometimes we push too much for what we call economic development, and sometimes we don't push enough for increasing the number of people who come into the city or go into Queensbury or wherever else who are wealthier. You know, to try, you always want a balance in your population of middle class, upper and lower. And I think, the other day I heard Gene talking about attracting veterans and sort of a homesteader act or whatever, where he's trying to attract people into Lake Luzerne. I think that might be, it's not the normal focus of economic development, but I think that would increase his tax base and done right, it could increase your tax base. I think that's a very good idea. But I think we need to also have a more balanced approach to economic development and look at how can we improve, the bringing in middle-class people and maybe wealthy people to defray some of the costs. That's a different way of looking at economic development.
Can I make just one more comment, Frank?
Yep.
I mean, that's great, but when anybody, that I'm finding, people that move to an area, say they come to Warren County, most people, the first thing they wanna know is how's the school system. The second thing, they wanna know what they can do in the area. But the third thing, they wanna find out how much is taxes gonna be on a house that I build there for $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000. So, and that's what they look at. I've had people come into the office and we talked about taxes and stuff, and, it's a big difference when you pay $3.80 to live in Lake Luzerne, or 51 cents in Bolton, or 61 cents in Queensbury.
Or $9.80
And then-
and,
Well, or $1.80, so,
no, 9.80.
well, but I mean, my point is, that's what people also, it's tough to get these, like, more affluent people, in some of the towns, because they're gonna be paying the money, and some of them don't wanna pay even though they got it.
I'm just saying that we need to broaden our focus as to what we call economic development.
I think this was good. I think we've had a lot of good comments, and I appreciate the chairman and administrative attorney putting all this together. But, like I say, I still think there's time, and we gotta really spend some more time thinking about it. There's gotta be a way that not that we're looking for handouts, but there's gotta be a way to, cause I worry, like your reval here in Queensbury, if that happens to, and I don't know where it's going, and you probably know more, if that happens to say, well, Queensbury's worth a little bit more, well, that percentage, Queensbury's gonna get more sales tax revenue. I know Mayor's happy that a new hotel's coming in there, because he's got a little piece there, but that hotel's gonna bring him in more sales tax revenue. So, and those are the things that we all look at. In Thurman, we're not gonna get a huge hotel or something, like Luzerne. So, those are the things, I appreciate all the people that get the sales tax revenue thinking about more than, oh, I'm gonna lose my sales tax revenues, but, we want a healthy county. You don't want 5 years from now, a couple of towns really struggling, and that's my last speech.
I was very interested in hearing people supporting business. I had an ongoing conversation this morning with, some of the people involved with the property at Lake George, where we're trying to get a big box store there, and I hope you still have that same mindset if I can get this thing moving. Okay?
Would you guys, agree that, it would be a good idea to, recommend to the chairman, that this committee has done its job, we can't find a reasonable option to redistribute the sales tax, and suggest that he move this on either probably to finance, maybe budget too, to look into ways to, get additional income to relieve the towns?
But I'd rather have him be told that we've 86'd these three proposals, and that we've moved on to looking at the casino money, and possibly tying that in with a 1% increase in the sales tax.
Well, and that's kind of what I said, only I think probably it would be better for the finance committee to look at those options. I don't know, you guys have any opinion?
So you would issue a report that says that you've examined the sales tax distribution, you've examined the law, you've considered options, you don't find any of the, under the current framework of the law, you don't find any of these options that have been discussed viable, and to the extent that the sharing of revenues among towns, or creation of new revenues to be shared with towns, can be considered, you recommend that it be referred back to Finance Committee, or referred to Finance Committee, or any other committee for that matter.
Agree. Dennis, you're not saying yes or no?
Well, I think we have an opportunity here to make an issue out of this casino money.
Well, that's what we're suggesting that.
Okay, then I make a
I guess-
motion that we suggest to the Chairman Garrity that, we don't think there's a viable option here, but we would like to pursue the have somebody in the county pursue the, casino money. There's no taxpayers involved in that casino money.
And that somebody being finance?
Well, I would
leave
leave
it to
that
the
up
chairman.
to Ron
Right,
if he wants to
right.
tackle it.
Okay, all right.
But I think what you're saying, Mr. Chairman, is this committee's mission is done. There might be other, like Dennis is suggesting, other new committees that we could look at in terms of economic development.
Well, Evelyn's saying that maybe we let the chairman, determine
He's
what,
gonna feel maybe that budget is more appropriate than finance is what I'm thinking, so I think it maybe would be appropriate, we've done our
okay,
due diligence and perhaps let him make that decision.
all right.
Well, the last comment I'll make is that I guess that's John's picture on the cash register.
Okay, the resolution to move this, or to give a final report to the chairman, and suggest that he move this to another committee
Okay.
Right.
Also,
of his choice.
I'll follow.
Evelyn, seconded by John, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
That was perfect. He did.
That's